I'd like to call to order our State 911 Advisory Board meeting, and I'd like to get started with our roll call. Chief Bryan.
Here.
Sheriff Bonner.
Tracy Kessler, sitting for Sheriff Bonner.
Chief Chappelle.
Scott Silsby in for Chief Chappelle.
Lisa Hoffman.
Present.
Chief Spiegel, sorry. And he may be coming in late. He did let us know that he would not be here when the meeting started. Leslie Wilson
Present.
and Chip Yarborough.
Charlie Cullen representing Chip Yarborough.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so the meeting will come to order. We're going to start the meeting with our closed session. So pursuant to Government Code 11126, subsection C, subsection 18, I'd like to call a motion for the closed session and a second. And if we all vote in favor, we will go into our closed session.
Lisa Hoffman, all motion for a closed session.
Charlie Cullen, all second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will go into our closed session. If we could ask the public to leave the room for about 15 minutes. Once we're done with the closed session, we will be calling the meeting back to order. Okay, we have concluded our closed session on outages, so I'd like to call the meeting back to order. And our first order of business will be approval of the September 2012 meeting minutes. Does the board have any questions or changes to our minutes?
Peter Bryan, I motion for approval of the minutes for the September meeting.
Leslie Wilson, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved as written. Then we'll move on to unfinished business. We're keeping this on the agenda, the advisory board meeting locations, northern and southern. For right now, we will continue having the meetings in Sacramento, and hopefully in the future, we will be able to resume our alternating meetings from Southern California and in Northern California. But for now, it will stay in Sacramento. The next item is, I'm sorry.
Can we here or at the end of the meeting maybe schedule our next meeting, schedule the date here today so that we don't have any confusion and delays, because it's very hard with all of us in our own jobs that we do on a regular basis to not have it planned out a little bit in advance.
Yes, we can do that. And I do apologize at this meeting. Our room did get changed at the last minute, so we kind of scrambled. But yes, we can do that. The next item is impacting technologies on PSAPs. At the September Advisory Board meeting, it was passed that the Long Range Planning Committee would create a matrix categorizing new devices or applications and provide a description of potential impact on the new technologies that it could have on the 911 services. So I believe Chief Bryan will have an update on that in the Long Range Planning Committee reporting. So were there any additional impacting technologies that any of the members have come across since our last meeting? Okay, then we're going to go ahead and move on to our 911 Advisory Board Green Solutions. We had a couple of items that we talked about at the last meeting, and we were researching things that we can do to be a little bit more green. And one of the items was the Bagley-King requirements of providing handouts to the public versus making them available via the internet. And per Bagley-King, we need to make the handouts available for public inspection. So therefore, what we'll be doing at future meetings is we'll be providing a very limited number of handouts at our meetings as far as the agenda and all of our handouts that are associated with the agenda. We will have a projection screen like we do today, so the public will be able to see all of the handouts as we move through the agenda, and then the handouts will also be available on our website. So all of our meetings going forward, that will be our practice. And we also agreed to leave this agenda, leave this item on the agenda for a few more meetings. And one thing I'd like the board to consider is if you want to bring your laptops or your other devices and you do not want the packet that we've been providing, to let us know in advance. and you will be able to access all the information from the emails that we send to you with the information. And that way we won't be making as many paper packets. But we will leave that up to the board members to let us know in advance. Okay, we'll move on now to reports. And so our first report would be the California 911 Division update with Ryan Doolin.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. The next series of items are interests of the board and on activities that the current 911 division is working on. I'd like to make known that there was an error in the September 2012 State 911 Advisory Board meeting with handout number 8. The noted unit of measure should state thousands instead of millions. A new corrected document is posted on our website to replace the inaccurate information, and that was a discussion that I believe Lisa Hoffman brought up. So we made that correction and posted that up there.
And the handout was?
Handout number 8, which is the Board of Equalization SETNA overview. The second item is a tracking document labeled handout number 2 is provided in your packet. The handout captures all the requests as a result of the State 911 Advisory Board meetings and their current status. Handout number 3 is provided in your packet regarding PSAP taking wireless 911 calls, which is of interest to the board, and the State 911 office had a goal of getting 100% by the end of this month. We are a little bit short on that. As discussed in our last advisory board meeting in September, there were 18 PSAPs not taking their wireless 911 calls. As of November 25th, we now have 14 PSAPs, so we are making a little bit of progress across the state on the list, still needing to deploy wireless 911. I continue to ask for your assistance if you need any data to supplement our conversations or your conversations with PSAPs directly. And we still are looking for that 100% compliance, but I do ask that the board reach out to your constituent base and encourage those PSAPs to take their wireless 911 calls. The next item of interest is Ogilvy Public Relations is now on board and working with the division to establish a statewide 911 education and awareness program. That contract was awarded a couple of months ago, and we're really excited about having that first statewide education awareness program implemented. And we will be working with the contractor over the next year and a half to deploy something in California. And we'll keep the board apprised on all the activities related to that contract. The division also continues to work on a formal procurement for the new statewide foreign language emergency interpretation services contract, which I continuously kept you apprised of. The current contract is in place until June 2013 to ensure there is no interruption in these services while we work on the new contract. And the last update before we go into specific project updates, there was a lot of activity recently at the federal level regarding text to 911. Most of you probably seen it in the news and some recent press releases. At the end of January 2013, the division plans to issue a request for information regarding text to 911 to our vendors and industry to solicit information on those solutions and implement a pilot project next year. Now onto the project updates. We have 5 approved next-gen pilot projects statewide, and the board has asked for an update on those projects on an ongoing basis. As of the end of September 2012, all PSAPs have been provisioned with the next-gen 911 IP-enabled network and routing Verizon wireless 911 calls on XY, which is longitude and latitude coordinates location when it is available in our Northeast Grant project up in Northern California. That encompasses 13 counties. We're really excited about that. We're the first in the nation to deploy such a network across the PSAPs and route wireless calls on XY. And AT&T is working to resolve issues related to the Butte County hosted portion of that project. The project team will be analyzing data through December of this month, which is the federal closeout on December 31st. To determine how we proceed with additional wireless service providers coming onto that system. Right now, it's just Verizon Wireless. The California 911 Division will be wrapping up the federal reporting requirements by December 31st of this month, and will be publishing a closeout report in the first part of January 2013. And that will go over lessons learned, what we found, what the architecture is, and all of the specific components.
So that'll be the fact sheet that was gonna maybe be done in October. We'll have
Yeah.
it for the next meeting then, or it'll be
Actually-
posted on the website too.
Actually, it'll be a comprehensive closeout report. The fact sheets are still, it's because that project has been continuously moving. We wanted to make sure that the fact sheet had all the information and not just kind of a project overview. So those fact sheets on each one of the projects are currently in review right now, and we plan on posting those up. We've been kind of focused on closing out the project and getting all the federal requirements the last couple of months, so we've been unable to do that, which I had promised in our last meeting. So we will be working to get those fact sheets. The closeout report is a separate comprehensive report only specific to that project.
So when do you think we would have those fact sheets? Because I know it's important to everyone that hasn't been involved in these projects to kind of look at that and see where they might be headed.
You know, my goal is to have them done by the end of December, but I know that I've been postponing that on the last board meeting, so we will try to get it as soon as possible. It's in final review, so it's just getting them over to Karen and getting them posted. That's the next step. So I'll commit to the end of January 31st, they'll be posted. All right.
And Ryan, I would anticipate that closeout report will have more detailed information, correct? So if you
Right.
wanted to look at that project, that would be the document too, that would have the information you would need on the Butte County.
Yeah, the fact sheets are going to be general in nature about the project and what our goals are. The closeout report on each one of the projects will have specific what the solution cost overall and our lessons learned and some of the things that you guys really would need to know to make decisions in your PSAP. The Imperial County project has signed system acceptance in November 2012. To resolve some of the final issues, AT&T will be installing Vesta 4.0 once it passes beta testing. The California 911 Division is working on a closeout report for that project as well, and we'll have it published the first part or the first quarter of 2013. So each one of these projects will have a closeout report. The third project is Pasadena Ring project, is working with AT&T on getting the build out on the host and configuration. The first PSAP was scheduled to go live January of 2013 and has been pushed out to the second quarter of 2013, and that's because it's taking longer to build out those facilities from AT&T's side.
Ryan, just out of curiosity, I know I should know this, but I don't remember and I didn't do my homework. How many are involved in the Pasadena Ring? How many PSAPs?
I think phase one is 8.
8?
Don't quote me, but
Okay. So that's
it's-
relatively large.
oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And they've been doing a really good job on coordinating that from the project management perspective and getting all those PSAPs on the same page. It took a long time, so no doubt. But the first phase is 8, and I believe they go to 13. It's very sizable project.
Do you know if they're small, medium, or large, or all size PSAPs? I'm just, of course, nosy just about the large PSAPs, but I'm not sure, what the size is on these PSAPs.
I don't know off the top of my head.
All right.
At least I think from when I saw a presentation on it, and it's a mix. So you have all different types of pieces, which is good. I mean, that's what you would want in a project like that, so.
And that was our goal, is really about different architectures and different solution providers so that we can compare these projects and see what is going to be best. So that was the intention, is to start, some of these projects are small. They have like 3 PSAPs in Imperial County or 4 PSAPs. And so the Pasadena Ring is one of our larger in comparison to the grant project, which had 36 PSAPs overall. The fourth project is Ventura County project, has cut over Simi Valley Police Department, East Valley Emergency Operations Center, and Oxnard PD. Ventura County Sheriff has pushed out their cutover date to the first quarter of 2013 due to a CAD interface issue. This project also has a location-based routing, which is XY coordinates, and that proof of concept end-to-end testing is scheduled for the second quarter of 2013. And our last project, number 5, is Mendocino County continues to work with pricing and the contractor that's doing the project management on that up in Mendocino is putting together the best and final request offer with the vendors. So we're waiting to see all of those numbers so we can see how the path go forward. That concludes my updates, and are there any questions on any of those?
Brian, Lisa Hoffman, I have a question. Going back to the language contract, so the current contract, I believe you have one preferred vendor, but then we can continue to use vendors of our choice. Is that part of the contract going forward, or have you decided on that?
Currently, right now, the state contract only has one vendor, so that's CanTalk. The PSAPs have a CMAS contract, which is the California Multiple Awards Schedule, and it allows them to then seek other foreign language interpretation services. So those are the options currently today.
Okay, and do you anticipate having those continue to be direct bill, or is there going to be like a reimbursement on, do you anticipate it changing in
Yeah.
formula?
The state requires right now with law that the state contract be the direct bill, and that the CMAS really needs to be a reimbursement process that the PSAPs pay directly, and there's varying cost with each one of those contracts.
Okay.
And we'll talk about some of those things coming up later in the presentation today. Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. We'll move on now to the state emergency telephone number account, and this is also a standing item. The fund condition statement that is in your packet is the same fund condition statement that was passed out at the last advisory board meeting. We do anticipate getting an updated condition statement probably in the next couple of weeks or month. And soon as we have that, we will send it out to all the advisory board members and post it up on our website. The other item is at the September meeting, there was a request to create a list of the agencies that are currently on a month-to-month maintenance plan and include this information on which PSAPs are up for renewal but are deferred to a later time for an upgrade. We're still pulling this information together, and we hope to have it to everyone by the next advisory board meeting.
Karen, if I could just comment briefly on the fund condition statement. Would there be a way at the next meeting, I realize that these numbers change based on expenditures, et cetera, to take a look at 2013, 14, because I think there is going to be, at least from the initial glance, that there would be a shortfall. If we remain at the same funding level, and if the surcharge is at .050. So it would be, we kind of want to get out ahead of this, I think, rather than waiting till the last minute. So if we can possibly at the next quarterly have a projected, and I know those figures wouldn't be exact, but what the 2013, 2014 would look like.
What we can do is provide the fund condition statement as we get it from the Department of Finance and
Okay.
the Board of Equalization, and then we could put together some projections.
Thank you.
That we can do.
Great, thanks.
Are there any other questions? Okay, we're going to move on now to the County Coordinator Task Force report.
Mrs. Wong,
I'm
we're going
sorry.
to go back and pick up the LRPC.
How did I miss you? Oh, I'm sorry, Peter.
It's
Out of
okay. We can pick,
compliance.
at some point in time.
Okay, let's go back now to the Long Range Planning Committee report. I completely apologize. I jumped right over that.
Thank you. Certainly would like to thank Michelle Bland and Charlie Cullen and Chris Herron for the work and the progress that the LRPC is making. We met again yesterday and several items to report, so I'm going to run through those real quickly, and certainly if the board members have any questions, stop me. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep rattling on. First item is the Chapter 3 of the Ops Manual, and that's on funding. We have completed our review of that one, mostly on technology, on terminology, deployment of wireless, and call-taking priority software, and those are some of the major provisions in there. We will be sending Chapter 3 to the board for them to take a look at and certainly take any appropriate action, and we would anticipate having that to the board for the March meeting. We just have some cleanup items that we'll be taking care of in the next week or so. Second item, at last month's board meeting, the board approved the charter for the LRPC, and just would like to remind and encourage and ask, we still have one vacancy, and we're looking for either an APCO member or California Police Chiefs Association. And those are the only two organizations that can sponsor a member to the LRPC.
Peter, do you want to mention that it can be the alternate?
Good point. Thank you, Charlie. It can be the designated alternate for the board member, but it can only be either the board member or the designated alternate. So that's another good reason to have a designated alternate, is because you can task them over to the LRPC. So just a plug, and I know Lisa's looking at me because she's
Peter's looking at Lisa.
the only representative here of those two organizations, and since we've got a vacancy at the California Police Chiefs,
So APCO would commit to having a representative on the board or on the committee. I'm not sure if it will be me or my designee, but he's looking down and not looking at me also, so. But APCO would commit to working on the long-range planning committee.
thank you very much. Next item is the review of Chapter 6, the fiscal and operational review. We've begun that review. We anticipate that taking a little bit of time as we look through that. And our discussion yesterday also included the potential, or certainly the concept of changing that to be a technology review as well. The office indicated that doing the reviews is very difficult because of some travel restrictions, and yet certainly there's interest from board members, and I think probably from the LRPC, to continue those reviews. So we're going to be working on that chapter and trying to make that doable and usable at the same point in time, to where it produces something that's functional and a benefit at the end. We are also have created a new draft Chapter 10, which deals with closures and consolidations. Closures would be a policy. It would actually be in the ops manual, but it would be a policy for closures and guidelines for consolidations. At yesterday's meeting, we had a discussion on the consolidations that would include and require deployment. And I think it was the committee's feeling that deployment was important enough that if you're going to consolidate 2 or more PSAPs, that deployment was something that we thought needed to be done and would be a mandatory function of a consolidation, as long as that consolidation is looking for SETNA funds. So we're working on this new Chapter 10. We were tasked at one or more of the last 2 board meetings to take a look at the WARN Act and, as Mrs. Wong indicated, the new and impacting technologies. We've started that, but we haven't made all the progress that we want, so we're going to continue with those 2, and certainly with our new member, we can maybe make a little faster progress with that one.
Peter, can I mention one thing on the
Charlie.
new technologies? One suggestion was that we kind of break those out into different types. I mean, there's new technologies that impact vehicles, or solutions that are proposed that provide vehicle location. There are those that work on a smartphone. There are those that directly interact with the PSAP. So we were possibly looking at categorizing those. And then I think reaching out to the PSAPs, because a lot of these various applications and solutions come up and we don't know anything about it, and sometimes even the 911 office doesn't know about it because it's something that's developed in somebody's garage and is that there people are putting it out there. So we really want to poll the PSAPs and find out what is going on out there, and maybe have a one point of contact where people could or PSAPs could send that information in so that we can categorize it and keep a matrix of what's going on out there. And I think at the next meeting, we'll have some more solid proposals on how that would work.
Correct, thank you. We've currently got on that list, similar to OnStar, 911 Tracker and Smart 911, but we know that's going to expand, and we know that that technology, as Charlie's indicated, it's homegrown or it's corporation grown, but nonetheless, we know that it's going to continue to grow. So we're going to work on that as well. We made a decision yesterday on the glossary, and there is a glossary now that's in the operations manual. So instead of adding that to the Chapter 3 funding, we're going to update the glossary and bring it into date with some of the new technologies and certainly some of the new processes and information that we think are appropriate, certainly as we go through those various chapters as well. And I think the last thing that I had was we are going to begin a review of the CPE funding calculations, historical information. Office is going to provide us with some of that historical information so we can go back and take a look at how those calculations were done. So as we look at that, Chapter 3 and the historical, it will be trying to understand how those formulas or calculations work. But I'm sure we will find a math or algebra expert either on the LRPC or we'll find one that can help us work through some of that. So we're looking forward to that one, and Ryan said he'll be providing that information to us. And I think, Charlie or Michelle, do you want to add anything else from the LRPC that I missed?
Yes, I think you covered it all very well.
And the LRPC is going to be meeting in February. We know we've got a board meeting in March, but we'll be meeting in February, realizing that gives us some time to work on some of these projects between now and February, so.
And I just want to thank you for
Questions?
doing a great job. No, thank you.
We're having
making
fun.
some progress.
Thank you.
And I also want to thank you. It's amazing the amount that the LRPC is actually doing, and we're really appreciative of everything that the members are doing. And I want to thank our APCO representative for joining on that as well.
Our APCO representative that has a question, when in February?
We're just going to be this week collecting some tentative dates, and then Paul will be doing that doodle thing. But right now, I'll be sending out an email. I'll include you in the email, Lisa, so that we can just look at some tentative dates that work for the committee members.
Okay, and I'll include you on it, Chuck.
Okay, let me take a quick look at the agenda to make sure I don't miss anything else. Okay, County Coordinator Task Force update with Nancy Vaughn.
Good morning. First order of business is, I'm not clear on whether you have it in your packets or not, but we did receive 3 additional applicants for the County Coordinator Task Force. So we're hoping first order of business is for the board to consider those applications and give us approval on accepting those members.
And we don't have those, so.
Yeah, I think the applications were included in the members' packet. Nancy can give you the names, and we can supply those applications after the fact. The office does concur with the recommendation of the CCTF on bringing those new members on board. So the board will just have to agree on those pending looking at the applications, if you want to go ahead and do that, or based on the names that Nancy will share with you. You guys can go from there. So I apologize about that, but we do concur with the names that she's going to share with you.
Okay, so the 3 applicants are Ella Sotelo, County Coordinator out of Los Angeles, Lori Souder with SHASCOM, and Cindy Copulos from San Joaquin. Based on the task force review of their applications, we all felt that they met the criteria.
Did the board have any questions or concerns or support?
Well, I guess I'm just glad to see that we have people re-engaging that withdrew their names. So that would be my only concern, that we come into this with a positive approach.
I guess
think,
I can address that with just saying that at this point, yes, everyone is coming forward with a very positive approach. We've already had one meeting sort of offline with all the new members, unofficial membership of the task force, and everyone has stepped up and been great with offering to help. So we're positive. We're going into this with a very positive perspective.
And Lisa Hoffman, I just want to thank, hi Lori, want to thank everybody for, stepping up. I think it's really an important committee. I think it's really important that we be engaged. The PSAPs need to have a voice in what's going on. And I think I really commend you guys for what you're doing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think if the CCTF existing task force members are approved, the 3 nominees, I certainly support it. It's important that the group's able to work well together. to get things done, so.
Do we need to have a motion? So,
Peter Bryan, I'd move for approval of the 3 new members to the CCTF based on the CCTF's recommendation and the offices.
Charlie Cullen, second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. it's
Thank you very
passed.
much, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that acceptance, my first announcement would be that the recruitment for the CCTF is closed. We have our full 6-member task force now. So the last time we spoke to you in December, our 2 priorities were to fill that task force and to provide a list to the 911 division of what projects we were going to work on. So we can put a check mark next to our recruitment, that is done. And we've also provided our list of items to the 911 division of what we would like to work on. Ryan has that, and he was going to work with the Long Range Planning Committee and see if we're duplicating efforts or if there's anything that we should be taking on. One of the things that is on our list is looking at the operation manual for the county coordinator chapter. What are those duties, and trying to rewrite that, or not rewrite it, but expand on it and see where we can improve that. So hopefully we're not duplicating efforts there. We'll work with the Long Range Planning Committee where necessary. So I also would like to introduce you to 2 members of the task force. Last time I was able to introduce you to Wes, Nita, and Tracy, who's also here today, sitting on the board with you. I have Delia Kraft with me here today. Delia, do you want to stand up? Delia is the Emergency Communications Manager with Orange County, and she has an interest in web design and is going to be taking the lead on designing our CCTF website. Just coincidentally, Lori Souter happened to be in Sacramento and came to observe the 911 Advisory Board meeting, and Lori is also here in the back of the room, so she's one of the new members that we've accepted. So the other priority we had for the task force the first quarter, or last quarter of 2012, was to plan the next forum for the county coordinators, the training option that we have twice a year. We had planned to do it in conjunction with NENA, but that's not going to work out this year. The extra per diem wasn't available. So we are now reconfiguring that, and we're going to try to do something probably in March. Originally we had looked at February, but there is a conflict with a large CAD conference that is going to be occurring in February. So it's looking like March would be a better time frame for us to get that done. We do have 3 topics that we've already got speakers lined up for. We're going to be having the state and Verizon coming to talk about ESN and MSAG updates. One of the questions we had was with location-based routing, do we really need to spend a lot of time, and to what level do we need to spend time updating MSAG records, the old database? And so they're going to speak to that as far as generating the shape files and what's really necessary. The second topic will be femtocells. One of the things we want to do is have the different providers of all the different products that are out there come and speak to us about what their expectations are for what should be delivered to the 911 centers when someone makes a call. The other issue we're starting to deal with in this area is products that require the customer to do some setup, similar along the lines of VoIP when that first rolled out. These femtocells, some of them have some customer requirements that if they don't do that, the PSAP doesn't get the proper information when it's delivered to the call taker. So we want to get a dialogue going there with those vendors and a better understanding of what their expectation is of what should be delivered to the 911 center. Adding on to that, we also are going to be looking at MLTS from the standpoint of we're seeing a similar thing where we're getting no record found calls coming in beyond the old PBX. You get a basic billing address. We're not getting the even PBX billing address at all. So we'd like to get a discussion going there with the vendors and the coordinators as far as what options we've got to follow up on that. So that's planned for March, and we're looking forward to that. So those were the main topics I had to bring the board up to date on. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
I have, Lisa Hoffman, I have a comment. Are you familiar with the work on MLTS through CPUC?
Yes.
So you have all that information?
Yes.
Okay, so if you have any questions, you can always contact me
Okay, great.
regarding, where it's at. It went through the administrative law judge. They did make a recommendation for California. So we're at that point where we're looking towards legislation. So If you have any questions, I'm always available.
Great, that's good to know.
And I just had one question, and with the Geographic Information Officer available now, you'll be utilizing his resource as expertise in GIS and those needs, and tying that in?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we have the Donna Pena as well with the state, and so we'll pull everybody in and get what we need.
And then you'll keep us informed of the LRPC, progress and what you've done?
Yes, and one of the things the coordinators do in their monthly conference calls, we do talk about what comes from the PSAPs regarding new technology. I believe Ella has been trying to compile a list. I have a list as well, so we can send that on to the LRPC to avoid duplicating efforts again as we pull that together.
In the area of new technologies, I don't think we can duplicate efforts enough because things are popping up all over. So I'm really glad that you guys are also pulling that information together.
All right.
And we could have a standing agenda item on the LRPC to discuss any issues that are brought up by the task force as well.
Okay, then I'm finished.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on now to new business. The first item is proposed changes to policies and practices. As I've talked about in recent meetings, the 911 Emergency Communications Division has been performing a thorough analysis on the state's emergency telephone number account, which I'm going to refer to as SETNA. The analysis has been completed, and we're going to be providing a presentation regarding the analysis in a few minutes. Ryan's going to go completely over this for us. In addition, the L.R. Kimball performed the high-level analysis of the SETNA account, which was provided to the board at the June meeting. The thorough analysis that we performed identified the state's reimbursement policies and past practices that did not coincide with the Warren Act, existing state law and existing policies. So it's taken us a while to get through this, but it was really important that we were very detailed and we were very thorough in what we were looking at. So what we're looking at now through these proposed policies and practices is to be back in alignment with the Warren Act. In addition, what this is going to provide all of the board members is a proactive approach in planning, reviewing, and working with the 911 office and having a better having the board put in a better, standing, I guess, to be able to provide advice on it for the state for the SETNA expenditures. We've been in more of a reactive mode for quite some time. This will now bring us into a proactive mode. In addition to this analysis, we've concluded that the increasing SETNA to the highest rate will not fix the current and projected declining revenue. There is just too big of a gap. In fiscal year 2009-10, there was a significant decrease in revenue at 16.18%. In the following year, 2010-11, the decrease was 4.25%, and last year the decrease was 3.69%. We're expecting the decrease to continue next year and every year after, and it has to do with the way the technologies are today. So Ryan's going to go through the presentation. What I do ask the board is that we can hold the questions to the end. I'm expecting that there will be a lot of questions. I want to make sure that we document these questions and are able to come back and give answers. And again, these are proposed policies and procedure changes, and we're really looking for the board to provide us some insight and advice as we move forward. Thank you.
Good morning again. So go ahead and you see the presentation up on the screen. As Karen stated, we've been working the last year and a half to perform a detailed analysis on the SETNA and have been updating you as we progress along evaluating the SETNA. Now that we've completed our activities, I wanted to go ahead and share some of the specifics, our methodologies that we applied to evaluating the SETNA and how we're expending the funds, some of the findings that came out of it, and then the next steps. It works. So what we did in our SETNA review is actually take a holistic view on managing a statewide special fund like the SETNA. And so when we look at it, we're talking about policies that apply to all 462 PSAPs, not individual specific one-time issues. So we're really looking at how best to manage the state fund overall and the best practices that are wrapped around those financials. So what we did is, in the policy area, we are looking for alignment with the Warren Act, which Karen mentioned. That's the Warren 911 Emergency Act, Assistance Act, and the Emergency Telephone Users Surcharge Act, which kind of outlines all the parameters of how the monies are to be spent and applied. We looked at the best practices of the actual PSAPs with respect to the customer premise equipment replacement cycles, which is currently 5 years, the use of the state customer premise equipment and foreign language interpretation contracts, which are currently state contracts, and as Lisa mentioned before, have the option for the CMAS option for foreign language, and the actual reimbursement, PSAP reimbursement costs for travel and training over the 2011 year. Karen also mentioned that we provided a high-level SETNA review document in June, and that outlined some of the high-level trends that we have identified and shared with you with respect to revenues and expenditures, how we're actually spending the money and how the PSAPs are requesting reimbursement. And the big task that we had was actually going through all of the reimbursement data for the last 9 years. So that's the big undertaking. We actually looked through all the expenditures and mapped out how the PSAPs are actually using this over the last 9 years. What a lot of people are interested in is the condition of the SETNA. So in your packets, you have that handout, which kind of goes over the fund condition statement. We, as of the last meeting, we updated you with our projections. This is another projection as of December 2012, which is as of Friday. So we had to scramble to get some of these numbers in here, but we wanted to be transparent and really give you the up-to-date information that we had. And as you can see, the projected 2012-13 number is 39 million reserve in the SETNA account. That is not money. I want to be clear that that is just not money that we just found. Those are as a result of the delayed contracts, which you guys are well aware of, the 5-month delay. So the money is, even though there's a reserve, there were delays where PSAPs could not purchase equipment. So those expenditures will be coming around through the PSAP requesting process. And we do have the unit of measure correct, which is the thousands. So if you take the number reflected in the box times 1,000, that'll give you the actual number. So these are actually $39,753,000 is the balance. Is that clear? Okay.
Ryan, just for, that is the balance going forward into 2013? Is that correct, or is that the, what you anticipate the revenue balance to be going into the 2014?
No, that's 2012-13 fiscal year.
Okay.
So that'll take us to, that will be the balance projected for June based on all of our expenditures and the known expenditures that we have to date.
So going into fiscal 2013-14, you'll have a $39 million reserve.
That's right.
Okay.
And, and then come March, we'll give you another fund condition statement with our projections like you requested. We're doing that all the time. We have a standing item, and you'll see how the office is expending these funds, and these numbers will be updated again at that time, at all the known projections.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. So the next item is our methodology. So what we did was we reviewed the Warren 911 Emergency Assistance Act, it's a mouthful, and the Emergency Telephone Users Surcharge Act to align reimbursements with the actual expenditures. So we're actually trying to bring the program back into line with the law. That's really the fundamental thing. The second item, we analyze customer premise equipment reimbursement expenditures, annual accrual amounts, use of residual funds over the last 9 years. And these are all actual data points that we used. We compared the actual travel reimbursements by the PSAPs against the state-published California Department of Human Resources travel rates. We evaluated the PSAP CPE replacement cycles practice over the last 8 years. And because we have a varying degree of PSAPs coming on board as new PSAPs and PSAPs dropping off, it came to about 441 PSAPs that we evaluated over the 8 years. That's what we used as our basis. And then we analyzed the current and potential use of the CalNENA annual allotment as outlined in the State 911 Operations Manual that's published on our website. We compared the foreign language interpretation services reimbursement cost against the existing state contract. And I'll go over the findings, which are going to be coming, so I'm sure that those are questions in your mind, like, okay, what does that mean? And then the last one is we reviewed existing regulations for wireless service providers and their cost responsibility. And this is a policy that was established to roll out wireless in California back, I believe it, maybe 2005 or something. I can't remember the date, but we evaluated the regulation for expenditures that we reimburse the wireless service providers for wireless 911 capability. So given our methodology, the next several items are the outcome of the analysis. So the first one was that PSAPs have not been required to submit an annual plan as required by the Emergency Telephone User Surcharge Account. The California Revenue and Taxation Code specifies that PSAP submit a plan by July 1st of the prior fiscal year, and the office approved that by October 1st. That's currently not being done. This would, as an outcome of that finding, we want to require the 911 dispatch centers to submit an annual spending plan by July 1st of each year with that information. The second item is the annual accrual funding process allows for expenditures outside the span of what is outlined in law. The law is clear that there's 4 items that the funds can be applied for, and those are outlined here: a basic system with telephone central office identification, a system employing automatic call routing, and the approved incremental cost. The approved incremental cost is outlined as what is meant directly for a 911 system. Our recommendation is that we would like to provide funding for systems costs consistent with statute and sunset the annual accrual funding process. That is where today we basically pay for carpet, some facility modifications, et cetera, et cetera. The third item or finding is the current travel reimbursement costs exceed what is allowed by state per diem rates. Some local agencies use the U.S. General Services Administration maximum daily reimbursement rates. We evaluated 194 PSAPs that requested reimbursement in 2011 for travel and per diem, and found that if state rates were applied, we would have a potential savings of about $156,000. We would like to sunset the travel. We would like to set the maximum travel reimbursements consistent with state policy. The next item is the median for PSAP CPE replacement cycle is 7 years. We performed a statewide analysis over the past 10 fiscal years and found that the replacement history of what PSAPs do today is that they actually replace their system within 7 years, not the 5 years, which is in policy. And that's where we evaluated 441 PSAPs over that period of time. We would like to change the equipment replacement policy to be a minimum of 7 years. The next finding was the CalNENA annual allotment policy does not allow for the use of funds for other 911 training opportunities. This limits the allotment to only CalNENA-sponsored events, and we realize that there are other 911 training opportunities which would expand the PSAP's ability to take advantage of those opportunities. We would like to provide the same $3,000 However, sunset the CalNENA annual allotment and have that apply to all 911 related training. The next item is most foreign language interpretation service reimbursement costs exceed state contract rates. Currently, the state contract is 59 cents per minute with a 0.06 cents per call. The CMAS contract that a lot of the PSAPs use is $1.25 per minute, almost 3 times what the state contract is. So we have put the state contract in place to maximize our buying power. However, the PSAPs are not taking advantage of that. So that sets the maximum reimbursement rates for foreign language interpretation services to be consistent with state contracts.
What was that cost again, state contract?
The state contract is 59 cents per minute with 6 cents per call on top of that. And we do that because if they get disconnected, we've heard from PSAPs that there's a call that needs to be generated, so we're providing the 6 cents for the contractor to re-engage the call with the PSAP. And the CMAS contract is just for clarity and the public's awareness. That's the California Multiple Awards Schedule. We will not be eliminating options under this guideline for the PSAPs. We will only just be reimbursing to the maximum state contract. The PSAPs will have the ability to use whatever contract vehicle they need to. However, they will only be reimbursed by the state maximum.
So just for clarification, if somebody is using a different service that has a higher fee, then the difference between what the state allows and what the PSAP is paying would be borne by the PSAP.
That's correct.
So Lisa Hoffman, just a point of information. When we, quite a while ago, I can't remember the name of the vendor, we had a vendor that the state wanted us to use through the contract process. They won the contract, et cetera, but then that vendor went out of business, and it left us all high and dry. So I think the concern for most PSAPs is that we don't want to be in that same situation again. I'm not sure if that vendor was really ready to accept the volume of calls that they received because there was a lot of inconsistency with getting a translator.
Yep.
And then that vendor eventually just went out of California. So I just want to make sure that we're secure in the idea that we have other options if something like that were to happen again.
Yeah, that's why basically Karen has hired me. I am on the hook to take care of all of those contract needs. I've done my due diligence on trying to get out to the PSAPs since I've been here. So I've visited about 24 PSAPs. I've heard that there are contract issues, and I've tasked the 911 office to resolve those. We are tracking those. And so what I need from the PSAPs is actually if you're having contract issues or service issues, I need you to bring those to the attention of the office, and we will be on those. So I have staff that will research those. We meet with our contractors. The state is on the hook. Those are state contracts. And what I want to make clear is that the state contract, I make sure, and the staff and the 911 office make sure that we have all of the requirements that 911 needs. But I can only put the requirements in there that the PSAPs let us know. So that's item number 1. The second item is that we established the California, the County Coordinator Task Force to help us represent the view of the PSAPs. So in past, it's been used as a voice for the PSAPs. I really want to use the task force for issuing issues that are critical to carrying out the mission of the 911 office. So I want them to bring that information back to us. When we have service issues, I want them to bring back, hey, we're hearing that a lot of PSAPs are having this trouble. That's what that monthly call should be really focused on, and that's what we could have the task force then work on those specific issues on how to remediate those items. And so I want to work on those throughout the contract and ensure that the service level is still there. What was done prior to me coming on board, I don't know the history, and I don't know if they had the contract means to enforce those, but we are working not only with my office, but with also the procurement arm of the technology agency to make sure that these contracts are solid and enforceable. So I just need you guys to bring all of those comments or issues back to us, which we've had dialogue with the foreign language interpretation out in San Francisco, and you brought it to my attention. That's why I said it doesn't preclude the PSAP from getting another contract as a backup. I think it's probably important. However, we will only reimburse at the maximum rate. And if there are specific needs by the PSAP and they're just hammering issues, we will deal with those on a one-by-one basis. But they really need to reach out to their consultant, make us aware, and then we can get on it. Did that answer your question? That was a long one. Okay. And then the last one is the FCC regulation outlines that the wireless service provider's responsibility for costs from their network to the selective router is borne by them. Currently, because of the state policy, we're actually paying for that. And that was a good thing at the time because we wanted wireless 911 in California, but there was an FCC ruling several years ago that made the demarcation point for the wireless service providers, the selective router, back into their network. So we're thinking that California needs to sunset this policy, because it's just a policy, align with the law that the FCC regulation does, and then not borne those costs that are being addressed by the subscribers of the wireless providers. So we would like to sunset the existing wireless service reimbursement policy. So the next steps for these policies are that we presented at this meeting. We are asking for State 911 Advisory Board member and stakeholder input provided back to the state no later than February 28th, and that should be 2013. That was an error. We will be conducting stakeholder meetings if requested, and those are the association list that are representative on the State 911 Advisory Board. We are also making this available to the wireless service providers and any other stakeholders as requested. Our plan is to implement these proposed changes April 1st, 2013. We want to begin analysis on future structural deficit of the SETNA, which many of you guys have brought up. Karen has, let us know that there's inherent fundamental deficit issues with how the revenues are coming in, how we're collecting, and the nation is actually dealing with that across all the states. So I'm in contact with all the state directors that lead 911 in the different states, and this is an issue across the board. We want to develop a formalized process to seek State 911 Advisory Board advice on PSAP yearly spending plans. Because we have not been collecting these on an annual basis, we want to put a process in place where if we receive all the plans by July 1st, we do all of the work that we need to do as the State 911 office. We present to you guys what our expenditures, what the requested expenditures from the PSAPs are, and then if there's any inherent issues, you guys can then let us know. Then that way when we march along, because the PSAPs do have the ability to come to the advisory board if we don't see eye to eye and we get a denial to them, you guys will be on the same page. I think what the issue has also been is you guys don't have enough information because we're not getting those annual spending plans to make the advice that you need to. So we want to formalize that process. And then really we want to proactively manage the SETNA is the whole goal around this. Our jobs, my job, Karen's job, your job is to manage this SETNA fund, this special fund, and make sure that the funds that the public is spending is spent appropriately, and we're doing good government, and we're making our internal processes as efficient as possible. So we think doing all of these changes will help us to proactively manage the SETNA. And then basically a recap of the proposal to realign the policy and practices with law and based on existing practices. We want to propose these 7 changes. We've categorized those into the proposal categories. So the first three changes, which are the spending plan by July 1st, we sunset the annual accrual funding process and only pay for actual expenditures. And we set the maximum travel reimbursements consistent with state rate. That is all aligning with current law.
Ryan, I have a question
Yep.
about the second point. I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about with incremental systems consistent with state sunset the annual accrual funding process. So is what you're saying is there won't be a funding mechanism that the entities would be purchasing their whatever and then submitting for reimbursement? Or what are we talking about exactly?
So incremental cost, today they have residual
Oh, okay, so you're talking about residual funds?
is one component. So residual funds, they can then apply to pay for carpet and other type of things. There's a list of 14 items in our policy.
Yeah, you can't pay for carpet.
That's right. So
I'm
they,
telling you, they're like, because some of those incrementals are recording systems, not a CAD system, but recording systems
Right.
or other equipment that help or aid in the delivery of and/or collection of 911 data.
so those items are, they do fit under the incremental cost. So for instance, like a call logger or something attached to the 911 center that is directly associated with the delivery of local 911 calls. Those would, we'll have to work on all the specifics, but those look like they would fit under incremental costs. It's all of the things we pay for right now that are under residuals and that go beyond the approved list. Does that make sense? So right now, there's a list of 14. Some of those do not aid in the direct delivery of 911 system.
Right, like chairs. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I
So
just
all
want to
of
make
that
sure
has to be reevaluated to bring us back in line with the law.
Okay, and so when you say sunsetting the annual accrual amount, does that mean, I guess to me it seems kind of broad sweeping that it would sound to anybody like we're not going to have an accrual system to upgrade our equipment any longer.
No, we will actually be paying, we will fund actual expenditures. So if your system cost, for hypothetical purposes, $100,000, we're going to pay for $100,000. You do not accrue $10,000 or $20,000 over 5 years. We're not going to do that.
Okay, that's what I'm
Over
saying.
the 7 years, because the other component is to establish a 7-year replacement cycle. Over the 7 years, you would get a quote on what your actual equipment cost and any approved incremental cost, and that's what the state will fund you for.
Okay,
And I want to clarify, this is also the annual plan that PSAPs will be doing when they want to replace their systems. So if there are some incremental costs that they need, that will be put in the plan. So we would be able to evaluate it. It will come to the board as part of our process, so we'll be able to see how the PSAPs are spending the funds. Sometimes there might be special instances that we can't address, like with our little list, that we'll be able to actually still go forward and give the PSAPs what they need to deliver the 911 calls.
Yeah, the plan to me is the real key thing.
Yes.
You'll get that, they'll submit it to the office the prior fiscal year, then the actual expenditure occurs. So we'll have enough time to vet all that stuff out and bring it to the board's attention where we need your advice and work it out that way. So I'm going to continue with the other items. So the next two changes are, again, the recap is to change the replacement policy to 7 years. It's currently 5. And we're seeing that change will give us a $6 million projected annual savings. The next item is the sunset of the county annual allotment. And because we're still allowing the $3,000 to be applied to any 911 related training, it's cost neutral to the state. However, it gives expanded use to the PSAPs. And those two changes there are based on current practices. And then the next two is to realign with state policy. The use of state funds is setting the maximum reimbursements for the foreign language interpretation services consistent with the state contract. We also think that this is really important that the PSAPs understand the difference between the state contract, which I didn't highlight before, and the CMAS. The state contract has all the requirements required for 911. The CMAS contract is what I can use in my office for translation services. So if a citizen calls me, I can use that contract to just translate between the citizen and the government office. There are no 911 specific requirements on that contract, which I think is very important. And the last one is the sunset of the existing wireless service provider policy. Wireless 911 is deployed throughout California, and the wireless service providers are now getting subscriber base, a good subscriber base to pay for that. So we would like to sunset that based on existing FCC ruling and come in compliance with the federal direction and sunset that policy. So we realize that this is a lot to take in, but we think that, well, I know the state office has done a lot of homework. We've analyzed, like I said, lots and lots of actual data. And I just want to thank the 911 office, all the staff work that went behind this. I wouldn't be able to do my job without them being able to do that. So now it's time for us to hand that over and look for the board's advice in this area. And the last page is just kind of wrapping up a timeline. Wanted to share with you guys kind of the milestones that we've done over the last year and a half. So you have kind of a timeline or a view of what we've been working on to try to really come in line with state statute and law and really do good government overall. So that concludes my presentation, and I will take questions.
Ryan, there's a lot of, I think, good proposals here, but obviously we need to do something with the SETNA fund, and cutting costs is a big part of what we need to do, and then take a look at the revenue side as well. The one comment I would have is there's a lot of stakeholders affected, and I'm not sure that there's a long enough timeline for those stakeholders to participate in the discussion if you're expecting an end of comments by the end of February. I think a more realistic goal might be to implement at the beginning of the fiscal year, and that way you'll have an opportunity for all the different entities that you've listed quite well here to voice their opinion on the various changes and have input on the policy. Once again, at first glance, there's a lot of very good things about it, and I think it does pare down some expenses that are not needed. But I think you are going to have a lot of different constituents out there that are going to want to speak, and you may take a look at that timeline to see if you extend it a little farther to give more time for comments.
Yeah, and if you have that kind of recommendation, if you can submit those by that February 28th to our office, and we will look at that, and it makes sense.
Well, and I do want to let everyone know, I kind of drove this date. I don't like it to be too far out, because then what happens is that we get all the comments in June. So it's kind of a catch-22. What we do want to offer is we are more than willing to go out and meet with all the stakeholder groups. Is as we go through this process, we find we can't get all the stakeholder input by this date, and everybody's actively working with us on this. We, of course, will extend the date out. So we'll be glad to work with you on this. The other thing I'd like to offer the board as well is if you'd like to have a meeting prior to the date that we cut off with the comments and have some more discussion, we're more than willing to provide another board meeting between now and March.
Mrs. Leslie Wilson, well, I think that's where I agree with Charlie. Maybe the date should be for the end of the comments or recommendations by April 1st to start with the fiscal year. That would give people enough time in case of the impact to their budget. So I don't think pushing it out to April would be unreasonable, and then we would have our March board meeting before that, and all the other committees, the county coordinators and LRPC, if they wanted to weigh in or have any thought on that.
Okay, that would provide an extra 30 days, because that would provide the
February
month of
28th,
March.
Yes. It would give
Okay,
you at least because I think by April 1st, it gives everyone an extra 30 days, and then that can be a planning tool going forward, because most people approve their budget in May or June, that they're ready to go July 1st. when the
Okay,
other changes.
so I'll go like an extra 30 days at this meeting. I'll be glad to do that. And again, if we find that we can't get enough of the comments with this time period, we'll extend it out. But I just don't want to put it out there too far for the
No.
reasons I've already stated. So we will change this date to April 1st. Although, let's not do it April Fool's Day. Let's find a different.
March 31st?
Maybe March 31st.
No, I agree with you. We need to get this spending in line, and
Yes.
and something needs to be done. But I think Charlie's right. We do need to give everybody a little bit more time in their budget planning process, and most of us, I think, have that ready to go by May or June, so that should be sufficient time. If everybody's communicating, all the different groups with each other, we should get plenty of feedback. The only other comment I had was, in this analysis, are we looking at the county coordinator task force and their reimbursement, what they're being reimbursed for?
Yeah, so April 1st is the Monday, so if you want to make it April 2nd or something to
April
that.
2nd works.
So you get all your comments on April 1st?
Shush.
No,
Probably.
not April Fool's Day.
No, I think with the holidays coming up and everything, it's a good idea. And people aren't even going to really look at this until January 7th.
Yeah.
And to give them the opportunity to weigh in is a good idea.
Like I said, I kind of drove this date because, we don't want to go out too far. So more than willing, April 2nd.
And then Ryan, I don't know if you caught my second concern was looking at, did you look at the county coordinators task force and their reimbursement, what their reimbursements are allowed for? I mean, we don't want to cripple them, but we want to make sure there's a standard, as we've discussed in the past, that everybody's providing that job across the board in different counties to that standard, and that we're only reimbursing for those things that they should be reimbursed for.
There is still a lot of work to be done on the SETNA. These are our first, major proposals where we looked at all of those expenditures. But you're absolutely right. And what Nancy Vaughn had shared with you, there will be a standing county coordinator task force on the board. But I think that they need to evaluate, which we had discussions, I think they need to evaluate what the county coordinator task force or county coordinators should be doing and what's outlined in policy. And we should either concur or not concur based on how 911 is delivered today, and then reimburse on those specific activities and make it standard across the board. So I would imagine that that's going to be a next discussion as they evaluate the Chapter 8. I think that is a good approach, but I know that there are just a lot of changes that have to be done, and so these are the first big changes that we think will make significant improvements to the SETNA.
No, I agree. I just don't want to see that drop off the list. And-
Yeah, it's not dropped off the list, and as you can tell with Nancy Vaughn's update is that, we did talk about them updating Chapter 8. I believe the task force is on board with making sure that those are the right responsibilities that county coordinators should be doing. It's progressed. The 911 system has progressed over the last, I can't remember when that chapter was updated, I think in like 2008, but it's even progressed, since I've been on board. So we do need to evaluate that, and it's on their item list.
Thank you. And the other thing, any new items coming in with this next generation, that's also on the list to look at and evaluate, like GIS and the state GIS database layers, that
Yeah,
kind of
there's
thing
a-
for routing.
So next gen funding is critical. There's two things I see with next gen 911. One is what is required and what's going to be mandated across the board, and you can see the federal government is making progress in that area to kind of define that. And they have a lot of proposed rulemakings out on the street. And then the second thing is, how are we going to pay for it?
Ryan, I have a question regarding the training funding. The county coordinators task force, the county coordinators continue to receive their allotment for training? Can they use that for county coordinator task force meetings? Because they had indicated that they couldn't have a meeting because they didn't have funding for travel. I'm sorry, I was just eavesdropping on a conversation. I just think that that's something that's beneficial and that should be a forum for use of their allotment, because basically, although they're a task force, they are involved in a lot of the training.
So just for clarity, I've made a commitment, and I believe Karen supports it, concurs, is that we have 2 county coordinator forums each year. The reason why CalNENA, the additional per diem was not approved is because it's not just about the funding. It's about my office also being able to participate. So we weren't, by travel restrictions, I can't ship my whole office down to CalNENA. So we thought that to get more value out of it is that we would actually hold it in Sacramento at a facility, and that my office be able to participate so that we can hear some of these newer technologies coming on board. We can interact because we have monthly vendor meetings and we know what the discussion is, and we can actually hear from the county coordinators what the issues are, and then we can start being more involved. So there's twofold to the decision to not fund the additional per diem for an extra day at CalNENA. And that was the participation of my office, and also it would have been an additional day of per diem on top of what we are already paying for CalNENA. So that's the factors that were in there, but I've committed to the 2 county coordinator forums, and the office will be funding that and reimbursing the county coordinators to participate in that, because we do think it's valuable.
And just as a point, and I'm not trying to beat this to death, I do think it's the one opportunity a year that county coordinators have an opportunity to meet with a lot of the people that they provide service for at CalNENA, to have all the vendors there, so you're not just getting one perspective on a product, and for the state to be at CalNENA. I think it's really important, and I think it's something you should reconsider.
We have been at CalNENA on the annual meeting, and we have a meeting with the CalNENA Executive Board. I've committed to that after these board meetings on a quarterly basis. So we have had a presence at each of the CalNENA last conferences, and we also attended, as you are aware, the annual NENA when they came out in San Diego. So we have limited travel, so we've only been able to approve, either Karen or myself or one individual, but we still are showing up. And our office is open for any discussion. So I know that it's hard for travel, but conference calls, we've met with Leslie and Chip and walked through some of the issues. We are currently working with Leslie on her procurement of her dispatch system. And so we are more than willing to have conference calls and try to be as much communication as we can. There's 462 of you guys. There's 15 of us. So, we are trying to do the best we can with the resources that we have.
Just a quick comment on the county coordinator task force. Wouldn't it be more cost effective to have your staff go down there rather than bringing all 52 up here at a separate meeting? I mean, you're only paying for an additional day for something they've already traveled to. And I realize there are travel restrictions that you have to be part of, but hopefully those will be changed in the coming year.
And I hate to stop this conversation, but we really need to get realigned with the SETNA account and what we've been talking about. Participation at the county coordinator conference wasn't on the agenda, so let's kind of like get back realignment of the
Mrs. Wong,
proposals.
can I ask, this is Peter Bryan, the proposed changes, what's the impact to the current operations manual, chapter 3, and then what's the process for the office to revise that when LRPC gets you the chapter 3 that we've been working on?
I can't tell you what the impact of Chapter 3 is until we go through it. I think Ryan might have a better idea. But I think that would be a good discussion for your LRPC meeting in February, and to kind of go over what the differences are.
Okay.
Because I really believe the work that you've done on Chapter 3 will not be discarded. I believe it will still apply with these new policy changes.
Okay. Can I ask then, on behalf of LRPC, will the office for the February LRPC meeting prepare some discussion on what concepts need to change in the chapter 3? That way we aren't submitting it, coming back and then starting all over again, so.
Fair enough, yes.
And our plan to implement this is to actually, like we've done with other policy changes, that we would outline them in probably a statewide memo, and they would go out, and then we would follow up with the actual changes in the manual.
But again, I want to go back. These are proposed, so at this point in time, we really want feedback from all of our stakeholders. We also, if anyone requires any meetings for us to go into more in depth on any of this, please let us know, and we'll absolutely make ourselves available.
Peter Bryan again. Can you comment, or is this the appropriate time to comment on the anticipated fund balance then with these changes and expenditure controls or savings as it applies to next gen and the tariff or the surcharge? Or are we headed there this meeting or a future meeting?
That would be what I would want to put together once we have gone through all the stakeholder meetings, because there could be something in here that we've missed, some changes that we need to make based on the stakeholder input. So I think it would be premature for us to start looking at that right now until we finalize these and go through the process.
Okay, no other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then our next item that was on for new business was the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection expenditure, and it's a discussion. They did receive, as it's on our current fund condition statement, I'm looking for it on here, it was up to $8 million, $8.8 million. And there was a concern at the last board meeting on how this happened. So you do have a handout in your package of the annual budget process, and I want to walk you through at a high level the budget process. But what happens with the state, the departments identify an additional fiscal need, put a proposal together, it goes through their agency, it goes through the Department of Finance, it gets vetted. If it's approved, it will then be put in the governor's budget. Through that vetting process, there's identified whether it will be general fund, special fund, or any other type of fund that each department may have access to. And then it gets put into, if it's approved, into the governor's budget, which is released in January. So as it's going through the governor's budget process, there are a series of legislative hearings, Senate, Assembly, and the appropriate committees, whether it be the fiscal committee, whatever appropriate committees. And so it's completely vetted through the legislative process in a very open forum. In the case of the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, the increased expenditure to utilize the SETNA followed this normal process. We did provide the board the fund condition statement back in January, where it identified the $8.8 million as an expenditure going to the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. And so at this point in time, there's nothing that we could really do with this, but they did follow the normal process. Any changes that are proposed to the SETNA fund will come through this fund condition statement once the governor's budget is released. So if there's any additional charges to go forward for next fiscal year or any fiscal year after that, it will be identified just as it is with the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection with the $8.8 million before it's enacted in the Budget Act. So I want, maybe we needed to have explained this a little bit better back in January. And what I'll be glad to do is when we have our new proposed, when we have the new fund condition statement, we'll walk through what these expenditures are and what they mean and what the changes are.
And that you explained that very well, and I think we understand that this did go through the legislative process. I think we had more questions about what is that $8 million being spent on? And I think that's what the advisory board was concerned about. Is this something that's way outside of the realm of 911 and has just been allocated money out of this fund for to support a completely separate entity?
I agree with Charlie. I mean, that's the information that we're looking to see, because as we're doing all this other work, obviously that is impacting the SETNA funds.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not according to the law that's in place and the policies, then, I mean, how does this get unraveled potentially?
It would get it won't get unraveled this year. This stays. In future, it would get unraveled by going through the process. Now, these proposals are in the governor's budget, so what we can do for future reference is to make sure that you know what these are and what the impact is and what the money's being spent on. For this particular item, and I apologize, I kind of missed the mark on this. Thought you guys needed to know how this happened, at least when I went back in the minutes. This is technically how it happened. What it is, what I can do, and I'll be glad to put a notice out of what exactly this funding is for.
Thank you, Karen. We actually knew how it worked. We had already done all that homework, so sorry to make you do that over again. I think what we were looking for was, we want to make sure that if we have a process in place that requires us to follow a strict requirement on what we can or cannot purchase, is their funding being used in the same prescribed method? And that's probably our fault for not making that clear, and I apologize.
Okay, and like I said, in the future, we can absolutely do this, and what we can do, because we will be looking at the fund, a more of a proactive approach, I think this will shore up these type of issues as well as any other issues in the future.
Mrs. Wong, Peter Bryan, in simplicity for my mind, is this a budget transfer or is this an expenditure authorization and reimbursement?
This is an expenditure out of the SETNA fund. This is not a reimbursement.
So are expenses then either approved in some form of a process, or is it just a budgetary transfer?
It is approved through, because I hope I'm answering your question, through the annual budget process, the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection now has this fund to spend according to what was approved through the legislature. So it doesn't go through our office for approval. It would not be something that we would be presenting to the board as we would with the other PSAPs. They have legislative approval to use this funds, and so that's what they would
Can I-
expend directly out of there.
Can I ask then, has there been an analysis whether it follows the provisions of Chapter 3 for funding?
I don't think it has to, because the legislative process supersedes that.
I understand
once
that.
they allocate the money.
And essentially,
Correct.
that, I guess, was my question. It's essentially a fund transfer. It's not a reimbursement process.
It's not a reimbursement process, no.
And certainly, as one of the two California Fire Chiefs representatives, certainly we support what CAL FIRE does in the state. But at the same point in time, we've got X number of secondary PSAPs, and for the most part, I think CAL FIRE is a secondary PSAP, that aren't covered under some of the recent legislation that benefits primary PSAPs. And certainly, from my perspective, is nothing against CAL FIRE, but certainly all those secondary PSAPs probably need some of those same services and funding. And I realize how the process works. I fully understand that as a transfer. But certainly, I'd like it on record that representing California Fire Chiefs, we're concerned that there's a number of other secondary PSAPs that are not eligible for that. And I realize it's a state agency, but it still is a secondary PSAP.
And I appreciate that. Okay. Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to our next item, which is the agenda for future meetings. I would like to have Keith Tresh, who is our Information Security Officer, come to our March 13th meeting. I kind of have that tentative because we may want to use the majority of our March meeting on these proposals and policies, so that's very tentative. The next item is our GIS officer, Scott Gregory, tentative for June. Again, very tentative, because see how much time we need in the March meeting. And then we would like to have the CPUC come out in September, and then we still have the Cal EMA notification process, which is pending. Is there any other future agenda items that you would like to add? And you can always add them later. I mean, this doesn't prohibit additional items. And then announcements. I'd like to announce when we will have our next advisory board meeting as part of the announcements. But what I'd like to get from you is if there's any dates that you would like to have as part of our discussion on our next meeting. What I would like to do is to have a standing every first Wednesday of the quarter to be our meeting, so we don't go through this. So would you guys trust us to have Ryan do the, excuse me, not Ryan, Paul do the doodle, and to identify which day on every quarter we can consistently have these meetings? Or would you like to pick a date?
Lisa Hoffman, I just want to say that the first Wednesday in March is the 6th. So,
Sixth.
yeah, you'd mentioned the 13th, so, I mean, I don't care if it's the 1st, the 2nd, the 4th.
Oh.
I just want to make sure that we have a
Ryan's
solid.
correcting me.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, so I just, the office would like to propose the second Wednesday of the quarter.
Okay.
On the ongoing basis. And we went through and tried to look at other meetings, other conferences and so forth. There's a lot out there, but we thought that the second Wednesday of that quarter would be the most appropriate. And then I think there needs to be a conversation about if December is the best month to have our last meeting. I know that there's a lot of vacations and so forth, so you know, we may be able to deal with that later in the year, but I think that that needs to be a conversation as well.
So what we will go forward with is we will get the meeting scheduled now as part of this announcement as the second Wednesday of the quarter. And then what I'd like all of you to do is to take a look at that, and then we can discuss at our next meeting as an agenda item if we have our meeting in November or December as far as the last meeting, because I would really like to not have this in the middle of all the holidays.
Mrs. Wong, Peter Bryan, can we give you also, can we have a week to review those second Wednesdays?
Absolutely.
Take a look at organizational meetings and conferences and things like that. And then within 1 week, give the office feedback on that second Wednesday and November.
Yes, but what Paul will do is send his normal doodle out to you guys identifying these.
That'd be great. I think just getting it scheduled in advance is the critical thing. That way you have it blocked on your calendar, and as other things come up, you know you have that commitment already in place. And the second thing is having the the Long Range Planning Committee meeting the day before is very helpful as well for travel, I think, if we continue to do that.
Well, it must be working well because they're making great progress, so we appreciate that. And if is there any other announcements anyone would like to make? Okay, public comment? No? Okay. Then I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Prior to that, sorry, I
Oh,
think
sorry.
Charlie had an announcement to make and he missed it. NENA rep.
Does Charlie have an announcement to make?
Can you remind me which announcement that was?
The annual conference?
Yes, we do. The NENA Annual Conference is the 22nd through the 24th of January, which is the week of Martin Luther King Day. We begin on the Tuesday as the pre-conference classes, and we finish on the training event that NENA has, the training opportunity. And you can sign up on the NENA website. We do have all of the breakout sessions. Are they listed yet? The training sessions are on there. We hope to work with Ryan today and tomorrow or to work out when the state office is going to be available and how that format is going to work. So thanks, everybody.
And
Hopefully we
Karen,
will.
I'm sorry, I had one announcement to make also. Lisa Hoffman, APCO representative. Northern California, APCO is going to be hosting a trade show and user group meeting tomorrow at the Hilton in Concord. All the information is on their website, napco.org. It's a very, very beneficial meeting. Has a lot of information about what's new and evolving in the industry, and I recommend that anybody that can go attend. And I understand we have a very impressive speaker, keynote speaker, Karen Wong. So I'll look forward to seeing all of you there.
And then I just had one more item that I forgot to add on it for agenda items is an update from Mrs. Wong on the FirstNet, the First Responder Network. Thank you.
We will add FirstNet. And actually, what we will do is add FirstNet as the governing body, and then couch that with also the National Public Safety Broadband Network, so we can address both the governing body of FirstNet and the network itself.
Mrs. Wong, one more announcement. California Fire Chiefs would like to thank you and Ryan, and I know also a lot of office staff for compiling, putting together the materials, and doing the presentation to the California Fire Chiefs. It may be one of the first presentations to the public safety chiefs and sheriffs, and certainly we appreciate that. We know that's extra time commitment, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Since I interrupted the last adjournment motion, I'll motion that we adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
And before we have a vote, I'd like to wish everybody happy holidays. And now do we have a vote to adjourn?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much. Isn't that handy?